X. As President Xi Jinping called on his fellow countrymen in China to make blockchain a life priority, the crypto markets reacted accordingly. And some would argue it should have not come as a surprise also to the sphere. But that said, did it have or will it have an effect on other markets? For that, I'm joined in studio, lucky for me, by none other than BLOCKTV's Usher Westrup-Evans, senior correspondent. Usher, so first of all, indeed, the last 48 hours, as we're taping this, have been quite tumultuous for cryptos all around. Right. What has it done to other stocks?
Okay, so it's an interesting space here, Yael, because obviously the crypto markets never closed, so we've seen that live reaction and response for the last several days now. But the announcements are coming out just before the weekend. We've had the weekend in which there was quiet, markets were closed, and now heading into the start of the new week, markets have begun to open. We're starting to see some fascinating things. So, looking into China, we can see from the CSI 300, which is the main index, you could compare it to sort of the S&P 500, let's say, of China, from the Shenzhen and Shanghai stock exchanges, which saw on Friday, so that's here, we can see the 25th, an uptick of around 1.5%. So that was, the news was coming out around then on Friday. But then today, after the weekend, and the markets have closed now already in China, an uptick of over 3% on the day, particularly in the information technology stocks. That's what we're looking at here, the information technology index of the CSI 300. They have seen a massive surge, and this has really played out across the narrative. Tech stocks in China, which have now become incredible hot commodity. Think of the FANG stocks in the United States.
The four leading stocks.
Exactly.
Being the FANG stocks,
so we're now seeing the same sort of thing play out. Tencent, Alibaba, these guys are absolute machines, and they are seeing the strength of these tech stocks play out. And the strength generally of the Chinese stock exchange saw massively, led first and foremost by these information technology stocks, but on the whole, just absolutely dominating the space. And it's really playing very well into that narrative that Xi Jinping and the Chinese government are trying to build there, which is that China is a leader in the world of tech. China is a place where you can safely and securely invest in stocks. They're trying to entice a lot of Chinese companies that have listed previously on the New York Stock Exchange and others to come back to China and list there as a really meaningful exchange. Up until now, it's been in Hong Kong primarily, but still separate from that mainland China, where now they're really trying to pull in that narrative, and I'm sure the ongoing protests in Hong Kong play into that considerably.
Entirely so, and as you mentioned, that I'm almost thinking out loud with you right now that I really think everything was planned, and also the orchestration of that announcement by the Chinese president leading into the weekend had also the idea behind it actually to let that news sink in. Who knows? That said, we're taping this, I believe the markets in the Western Hemisphere in the United States, let's call the pair by its name, so to speak, have not opened yet.
No, they've not opened. Yeah. But let's take a look. So we saw the Nasdaq last week. It ended the week very nicely. A nice little uptick of around 0.8%, a decent little move upwards. It's going to be a fascinating one to watch, El, to see what happens with the Nasdaq when it opens, whether we're going to see that sort of continued growth, whether we're going to see the same impact from US stocks. I mean, a lot of it depends. We've had a pretty strong earnings period over this last quarter. We've seen some strong earnings reports come out, whether that trend continues and whether there's sort of a ripple effect, I guess. And it'll be fascinating to see, particularly, El, because normally when it comes particularly to high-end technologies, the high-tech world, the US leads the rest. When the US stocks, and whether it be those FANG stocks or whether it be, when they lead, other markets follow. You see the US go up, you see Asia go up. Now, could we be potentially seeing a reverse in narratives where Asian stocks are leading the trend? Yeah, that could be incredibly powerful, and that could really be a sign in this sort of ongoing clash of civilizations narrative I keep referring to, but the fact that maybe Asia is having a little bit more influence. Now as well, we can't put this all to blockchain. Obviously, the trade war has seen some breakthroughs in the last couple of days and weeks. There's been what's considered a narrative easing of tension, although we haven't necessarily seen that change results on the ground, but it'll be interesting to see if perhaps in the current political climate that also plays a big role.
And you know what surprises me, unless I missed it, I do not think that the American leader has reacted yet to that Chinese move, so to speak, especially in this time of trade wars. I would have expected a tweet. Needless to say, of course, there are other things going on in the world, but just to see some sort of a reaction from an administrative, not just the president, but anybody. Because this is the type of move that, as Matti Greenspan just told us today, can actually lead to, well, we all know the Chinese are trying to destabilize the US dollar, and maybe that's the first step.
And maybe it is the first step, and it is fascinating, as you say, Yael, that the US has been slow to respond, although perhaps characteristic of the current US governance that just seems behind the ball when it comes to this particular financial technology and the potential power that it has, and not just financial, but full, information technology element, power of blockchain seems to still be lost on a lot of the US government. It's been very slow in coming around, so perhaps the fact they haven't responded is characteristic.
No, I'm smiling because Mark Zuckerberg would like you right now, because essentially, what happened is that he sat there a week ago in front of the American Congress, in front of the Congressional Committee, and warned against exactly what is happening this week. Okay, when it comes to American tech stocks, as Asher Westrop Evans mentioned, it would be fascinating to see what happens in a few hours. Let's talk Bitcoin futures. At the end of the day, Bitcoin is, blockchain is the technology that makes Bitcoin possible. Reactions to that we saw also, but when it comes to Bitcoin futures, Bakkt, any effect on that?
Yeah, so Bakkt had a fantastic trading day on Friday, reaching all-time highs, 1,183 contracts executed, absolutely whopping the day before where only a measly 331 were executed. Really an incredible day, but that's the old news. Now we look at today, where again, the trading day is only in its infancy as far as Bakkt is concerned, but already 240 contracts have been executed. And the Bakkt volume bot that reports on the trading volumes, they're saying the day's only 3% done, and if this were to continue to 100%, it would be equal to 8,000 contracts traded. Still early in the day, that doesn't necessarily mean it'll pan out, Yael, but the fact that it's on to another great day, it's going from strength to strength. Yael, it's a very positive sign for the industry. I'd say very bullish for that institutional involvement that we've been skirting for so long.
And let me just say, people were just hating on Bakkt. But that said, yes, institutional-wise, very well said. Gold, though.
Yeah, so there's great that you raised that, Yael, because there's that one other narrative that we want to play into. Bitcoin is a store of value. This question has been raised again and again, but if we look here at the current gold charts, we see that while Bitcoin pumped 30, 40% over the weekend, gold, it just kind of traded along sideways. It's been in some decently strong ground, with the trade war tension still hanging in the air. People are turning to gold as a safe haven, there's a lot of global protests around going on. We're talking about Chile, Lebanon, all across the world.
Very true.
There's a number of major protests, Hong Kong,
South America,
everywhere. But it hasn't seen that same parallel, that sort of correlative effect that so many even predicted between gold and Bitcoin, which I think just really shows, as much as people might try and correlate it, when the president of China comes out and says blockchain is the future, that's going to pump Bitcoin, and it sure as hell isn't going to pump gold. So maybe it's a good thing for the industry. Let's break away from that narrative and say there's maybe more to Bitcoin, a growing and developing technology.
Exactly.
And it's not tied to the ancient wonders of gold, as great as they may be. It has its own things to offer, and it's living in its own separate world. I think that can be nothing but a good thing.
And as we're looking at these big narratives, speaking of big narratives, we are taping this clearly at the beginning of the week, the end of October. As we're sitting here, the EU's chief Donald Tusk just granted another extension to Britain.
Yes.
Allowing yet another delay through January 31st. As we're looking at other markets, first of all, the narrative behind this.
So, this is an interesting one, Yael. As I say, it looks like that they will get that extension that they're looking for, the UK that is, in regards to Brexit, extend out to January 31st. Whether that means elections, and they do go ahead, and what that means for the British narrative remains to be seen, but it's going to be very interesting now that it has been extended. It's going to drag this out even further, Yael. It just seems that Brexit is this never-ending story that's causing one of the great financial hubs of the world.
What is it doing?
The UK, London, it's causing such uncertainty in those markets. And with uncertainty, you get chaos, and as my esteemed colleague Dovi Wan likes to say, chaos is a ladder, and I'm inclined to agree with her on that in this instance. I think this could be an opportunity for Bitcoin.
I don't know if the Chinese government would agree with that, but still, yes.
No, but in this instance, you know what, I see focusing on the potential for Bitcoin's growth and in this, and cryptos as a whole, their growth in this potential market, I see. We saw Boris Johnson talking potentially about having a decentralized technology to help facilitate border crossings between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland.
When it comes to blockchain, actually, that would be safe.
Fantastic, fantastic.
Idea.
But that openness to pursue different technological solutions to problems they're going to have, seems like the UK is going to continue to have a slew of problems for at least the next year, many years, decade.
Who knows?
Who knows?
Who knows?
But at least for the foreseeable future, it seems that could be a chance for the British, very stalwart and markers of the establishment financial world. Maybe they'll open their eyes and minds and say what else is out there, and cryptos could be the winner.
One can only hope that they're listening to you. But yes, Asher, thank you so much for this overview of really the big narratives of the markets. This was Cryptonomics. We are BLOCKTV. We'll be right back.
For more news and updates, follow us on Twitter.